It's the idea of character to support your competency, and this is applicable for every person listening. You can be the number one talent at your field, but if you do not have the character, the inner character to support your talent, you will always fall to the level of your character. And so I always say it's your character, not your competency, that determines your capacity.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Andrew Roman Show. I'm so happy that you're tuned in. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing and talking with Pastor Isaac Elsner. He is the director at Grace Leadership College in Houston and also serves part of the pastoral team in Grace Church, also located in Houston. He is passionate about building leaders worth following, and we're going to talk a lot about that, I should say. But we're going to have the chance to meet him and just get to know him. It's going to be a great conversation. So without further ado, Pastor Isaac, welcome to the show.
Andrew, it's so good to be on the show. Thank you so much for having me.
No, absolutely. And, to give people context of this, so Pastor Isaac, he actually met the rest of my family first.
This is my first time meeting you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is, as many of my guests are. But it's always just an honor. I've heard so much great things about you, not only just through my family, but what you're doing at Grace Leadership College. And we'll dive into it. I'd like to just kind of dive in and get to know you a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and where you're from.
Yeah. So this was a landmark year for me because I turned the big 3-0. So 30 years old now. Yeah, I had a little bit of a quarter life crisis, you might say. Just thinking about, wow, I'm now 30. So that was funny. 6
now
years.
30.
I joke. 6 years of that. Been married to my wife Haley. She's incredible. And for those 6 years, I was youth pastor over at Grace Woodlands. And just recently in 2020 is when I made the transition over to Grace Church Houston to launch Grace Leadership College. And so I've been doing that now for the past year and a half. And yeah, man, it's been going great. I've been learning a ton. God's been moving. I'm getting to build something that I wish was built for me, back in the day. So really, really cool. We got a dog named Chance. He is our fur baby. He's a Saint Berdoodle, super fun.
Oh my gosh, adorable.
We need to go and go bass fishing. I'm a huge bass fisherman. So
you got to take me, because the only times I've been fishing have been in Virginia with my grandpa, and that was that was pretty noob fishing. I'll admit, and it's been years. So I'll take you up on that.
Yeah, I'd love to teach you. And man, I'm a fan of your show. Been listening to some of your episodes, obviously ahead of time, and you produce great content. You really do. It's very applicable. And so you should feel good about that. I'm excited to be on.
Hey man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the compliment. And like you mentioned, so you're starting to build something in Grace Leadership College that you wish, you could have had, or however the past tense works. Es que hablo español. Soy mexicano.
No, man,
I'm Mexican. So sometimes when you hear me with an accent, I
love it. You're bilingual. I only got English.
Well, English and then poco. And then you speak in tongues, so I guess that's bilingual.
Sure.
But
there you go.
So I want to ask you, and this is a question I've asked a lot of people, because a lot of times when people think about like success and all that, they think it's just like one straight trajectory from the beginning to the end, and nothing unexpected ever happens or anything. But did you ever imagine you would be where you are right now in the leadership positions that you have? I mean, did you see yourself where you are when you were young?
Hey, give me a qualifier on that. What do you mean by young? As in, like when I was a kid, teenager?
Yeah, I mean maybe like a teenager. Let's go kind of in your teens.
Yeah, man. I mean, no, not really. I was blessed to have some incredible mentors surrounding me at an early age that really helped shape me. But no, I mean, when I was a teenager, I didn't see myself as a pastor or as a leader. I was going to go to school to be a veterinarian.
Okay. I like a veterinarian.
So
that's awesome.
And then I found out that, that takes 8 years of college. So quick eject on that situation. And so I thought, then I'll be a news anchor. And so I'll go to journalism and be a broadcaster,
Okay.
news anchor, things like that. But it was about 18, 19 years old where God unequivocally kind of stuck his finger in my brain, so to speak, and just connected dots in my mind saying, no, you're called to lead, you're called to be a pastor. And from that moment on, it's been a full send, man. I've been going for it ever since. So
Wow. Yeah. Wow. No, that's awesome. Yeah. Because I love asking that question because, like I mentioned, so many people think that, oh, I have my whole life planned out, especially when we're young, right? Teenagers.
Some people do, but no, it's not the case.
For most of us, is not the case. And especially because, as you mentioned, like God unequivocally and very obviously said, hey, this is the direction that I want. Because one thing for all of our listeners is like, we all have our desires,
Yes.
And it's the reality check of like, hey, sometimes our desires don't always line up with God's desires.
Right.
And once we submit them, now that it may look like when you're like right now in Grace Leadership College and you're straight into ministry, or it might look differently for people.
Yeah. I would also say that sometimes we overcomplicate it though, because if your life, I'm a firm believer that God makes our path straight.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then that means he doesn't make things complicated.
Yes.
And so we're the ones that complicate it. I feel like if, a young person listening to this right now, if your life is submitted to God and you are living according to his word, then he says he'll give you our heart's desires, which then means if it's in there and you're submitted to him, then go ahead and start walking in that. Even if it does sound crazy, even if it is kind of weird, or you didn't necessarily think that, 2 years ago, that you'd be doing that. Why not take a next step? Why not take a step forward? Because he's not there to trip you up. Those desires are there for a reason. So I think
love that.
Life helps.
Wow. No, and that kind of qualifier that you said, because we do sometimes overcomplicate. God, is this God? Is this not God? And really the qualification is your life submitted to God?
Yes.
Like yes and no. And then if you say yes, then really like those desires, then we can say, okay, I'll walk on it. And we know that what scripture says that God, this is, I think, Paul writing maybe to Timothy when he said, that God is faithful to complete the work that he started in you.
Yes. Yes.
And that's also a great qualifier because he'll complete it. Now, he says the work that he started, not the work that you started.
Yes.
So it's the work that he started.
Yes. I'm confident in this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it out into completion. So good.
I love that. Now, I have a question though, because you mentioned, okay, you heard God, hey, go into kind of this ministry, and now in this last year, start, Grace Leadership College. But I'm assuming it probably wasn't just a piece of cake and everything was just like, oh, super easy. Through your journey, was there ever like a moment, or it could be a season, whatever, you can get as specific as you want to, but was there ever a moment when it was kind of difficult to move forward, to press on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say I'll just shoot a couple examples your way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because our audience is broad here. My first assignment as a youth pastor, I remember the third weekend, bro.
Oh snap!
Before service, I remember crying my eyes out behind one of the kids' ministry stages, just be like, God, like what's going? Like this is so much harder than I thought it was going to be. What am I doing? So I remember that moment. The transition from youth pastor to college director, that was a big one too, because I always thought I was going to be a youth pastor for a long time. And then all of a sudden, 6 years is pretty long, in the grand scheme of things. But God said that it was time, and didn't necessarily know what that meant, but started in the process of obedience of figuring that out. And that was difficult because you don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And when you don't have the end in sight, it's hard to take the next right step. And so there was definitely a lot of processing and prayer, but I think that just being obedient to the voices of wisdom around your life, not taking things or thinking things as coincidence, but taking things as providence, really help in that.
Yeah. Do you think we do that often?
Details of like,
yeah,
looks like, but
That's fine. But do you think we do that often, that there's a lot of providence that happens in our lives that we just kind of shrug it off as coincidence?
100%. 100%. I fully believe that, because again, God is not, he doesn't exist to play games with us. He has a mission and a plan for every single one of our lives. And he will use a process, right? We hate that word. That's like that's the scary word for young adults. But he takes that process and he's taken us on a journey, and he wants to get us. He uses that process to make us into who we are. So I agree with that.
Yeah. Wow. And you mentioned something a couple lines back, I guess, whenever you were mentioning about those tough moments when the transition going from, the Woodlands to where you are now. And you mentioned some key things. You said, after much prayer and thought and listening to wise counsel, and then you said really just moving forward, because something, guys, that I want you to listen is I'm hearing this emphasis from Isaac often is, oh, here I go, I'm rolled up here. No, I'm just kidding. Is hey, take the step. I think many of us, we're sitting on our hands thinking, God, I want you to create a cloud that spells out everything that you want me to do. And that's the sign when God's like, okay, have you prayed about it? Have you asked for wise counsel? Now go. Like, do it. Just go for it, for whatever God has placed inside of you. And now my question would be, with now your experience in directing Grace Leadership College in this last year, walk me through what's going on. What are some even like leadership lessons that you've learned through now taking that position?
Yeah, some of the leadership lessons that I've learned just recently with that is that now I have to be thinking at a higher level. This is a bigger organization that I'm a part of. This is a larger church. I now have a staff. I have to be thinking farther, faster, and first, right?
Oh, wow.
And so, because that's what the leader does. And so that's been a beautiful learning experience for me. Also, the idea of having the proper expectations of how long something's going to take to build. I mean, we're building something from the beginnings. There's never the church that we're at has never had a leadership college before. This isn't like I took over something that existed. And so you have these aspirations and the ideas of, we're going to start with X amount, and then begins, and it's not what you thought, but it's good and it's right and it's what it's supposed to be. And then just it's almost like I hear people say it's like planting a church almost, where you have the people that come along at the beginning and then now it's not the flashy thing anymore. And so it's like, oh, okay, peace, that was cool. And so lots of
the food. We came for the food. That's about it.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Exactly. Another thing that I learned is, I would say, that idea of, I said that, like the preparing the work to be done. Preparing the work to be done instead of the one actually executing it. Because if you're at the top in leadership, there's this mind shift of, I'm the one that's actually preparing the work and planning what needs to be done, but I'm not necessarily the one that is executing it, because because you have your team for that. You have your people, you have your people that are executing. And if you are doing that as well, you should, because you have to lead by example, right?
Right.
But there is that level of that extra weight of, hold on, people are actually looking to me to then know what to do. And so if I'm not putting enough time and effort and energy into the planning ahead and the thinking forward, then we're just going to be reacting instead of responding, or instead of executing a plan. So those would be some of the primary, leadership lessons that I've learned just recently.
That's next level leadership.
Yeah, it's next level. It's next level stuff. And I'm blessed and happy to be in that season. And it's never too early to start putting those things into practice. When you're in high school or in college, it's never too late.
Yeah, you said something. Yeah, I love that, because you said something at the beginning that I think you mentioned. As a leader, like, I have to see farther, or think farther, or see farther, or think farther.
I think the quote, I can't remember who said this, or who I heard it from, but you have to see further, faster, something like that, because no one else is thinking as much about it as you are.
Right, because you're the leader. You're leading everything.
You're the one. So no matter how bought in your team is, no matter how bought in the people around you are, you're still the guy. You're still the girl that has to be thinking forward. And yet at the same time, you got to be in the moment too, but that's a whole nother thing.
Right. At the same time, you can't be lost in the clouds. You have to be in the moment. And something that I also wanted to kind of follow up with that, because we're kind of right now on the topic of leadership.
Yes.
And something you mentioned, you're really passionate about building leaders worth following.
Yeah, man.
Now, we just talked about some big kind of next level leadership stuff that maybe someone can feel, well, I'm not leading an organization.
Exactly.
I'm not leading that. But what are some, how can we become leaders worth following?
I love that, man. I'm so glad you asked that question. I bleed this, because I think at the end of the day, there are plenty of leaders out there, but are they worth following?
Yeah.
There's a difference. You have to lead in a way that you're actually you're worth following. And the ultimate blueprint of that is Jesus. Jesus was the ultimate leader worth following. And let's look at some characteristics of what that looks like, right? I think the biggest one, and the first one that would stand out, would be that he was a servant. And so the idea of servant leadership. But what's so funny is Patrick Lencioni, he said this. He said, I don't like the phrase servant leadership, because you're either a leader or you're not. You're either being a servant leader is leading. There is no other way.
I see. Yeah.
There is no other way. Either, if you're not being a servant leader, then you're not
just not a leader.
You're just not a leader. And I just totally see that in Jesus, right? I mean, I think of that moment where he washed the disciples' feet, right? And they couldn't believe that the top dog was going to the bottom and doing what others wouldn't want to do, but it was what was necessary. And it took their breath away. Right? They gasped. Yeah. They were like, and Jesus was like, no, you need to do what I have done. And I think that it shouldn't be a thing. Well, what's so cool is then Jesus then one-upped himself, and he was like, watch, I just took your breath away, but I'm going to go the whole nother level, and I'm going to serve to the point where I'm going to take my own breath away, right? Wow. To give it my life, for you. But I think it shouldn't be a surprise. People gasp when they see the top person go, oh, wow, look, they're stacking chairs, or, oh, wow, look, they're doing this, that, other. It's like, no, come on. That's being a leader worth following, servant leadership. So that would be one. That'd be one powerful example.
That's powerful.
Another example I would say would be to prioritize people over product. That's something that I learned. That's the idea of, man, at the end of the day, God's all about people. And yes, the product, what you're doing, what you're putting your hands to is important, and it is necessary. But what is the, at what cost, right? You see some leaders and they just blaze this trail, but then they leave a trail of bones behind them, right? And it's because they were all about the product, but they weren't about the people. And so I think always putting relationships first, always leading from relationship, I think is huge. And then this is the one that if every college student, any GLC student, if they had $1 for every time they heard me say this, they'd be able to pay for their tuition. It's the idea of character to support your competency, and this is applicable for every person listening. You can be the number one talent at your field. But if you do not have the character, the inner character to support your talent, you will always fall to the level of your character. And so I always say it's your character, not your competency, that determines your capacity. And so those are just some spitball examples.
Oh man,
of what we
could end right here.
But we could go on, bro. Like, I love
powerful.
talking about this.
That's so powerful. Like you mentioned, I mean, you brought up that servant leadership, and the great point of maybe someone listens to that and they're like, well, that's such a great style of leadership, but I'm different. I just do things my way. And you're like, well, you're either a leader or you're not. And a leader is one who serves like that.
It is, at the end of the day, the core definition of it is. And think about it. Like those of you listening right now, think about the people that you love to follow, right? Think about those people. Think about that coach that just inspires you and you'd do anything for, right? Think about the parent that you just absolutely love, or the teacher or the boss that you have at your job. And more often than not, the reason why you either love them or find it a hard time following them is based upon whether or not they exemplify those characteristics that we discussed.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
Yeah.
And the last thing that you mentioned was about prioritizing people, over the project.
Yes.
And I think that's so needed to hear, especially right now when I think, and in the age that we have it's not like the first year we've been in the digital age, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, people are seen as a means to an end rather than the end. Like exactly. they are the end focus of who we are. Instead of their look like, well, maybe people can help me get where I want to go.
Right.
Maybe
but at the end but you have to look at Jesus, right? This is ultimate leader worth following. The people were always the end.
Yeah.
They were always the end. They were not the means. And getting that inside of us, no matter what we end up doing with our lives, right? No matter what the call is or what the dream is or whatever God specifically says to put our hands to, right? The people are always the end goal, because the people are like, this is so cool. This might be a little bit of a tangent, right? But
no, go for it.
But, we talk about dreams and we talk about what God, wants us to do and purpose and the big thing. Why am I here? What am I here for? Right. But then you think about like God, right? And why did God create humanity? How the heck did that even happen? Why did he even do that if he was God? And it's this idea of like, what's God's dream? And if you think about it, people were God's dream. And so if you're struggling to figure out purpose, if you're struggling to figure out why am I here? Well, why don't you pursue the God dream? Why don't you go after people? Why don't you love on people? Why don't you because that's a God dream.
That's powerful.
And if our dream's a God dream, then we'll live the dream. That sounds
good. I love that.
That sounds like a cliche bumper sticker. But you can use it.
Many cliches are true. It's true, cliches because they're said so often, but that's awesome. That's so powerful what you just mentioned. I had never seen it that way of like, hey, what's God's dream? And so many of us are lost, and we overcomplicate our calling per se, or we overcomplicate like the meaning to down to the detail. And I'm not going to move forward until I have everything figured out. But when in doubt, just follow the God dream.
Yes. Follow the God dream. And that's people. How can I love people? How can I point people to Jesus? Wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing, how can I do that? Oh, I'm going to have some fulfillment.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And, I'm listening to you, and one, I'm honored to have you here because I'm learning so much from what you're saying. And you're like you mentioned, you're in a position of leadership right now.
Yeah.
You're leading people. If maybe this is an odd question, but is there something that, looking back into just your faith journey, let's just put it there, your faith journey, is there something that maybe you wish someone would have told you earlier?
Yes. Oh, of course. Absolutely. Like some of the things that I wish I knew now back then when I started. Yeah. One would be to not connect my self-worth to what I produce. That would just be huge. my value and my identity is not connected to that. And I'm a huge fan of counseling, and you don't have to be like, we're all broken to some extent
Right.
always, but the stereotype or the shtick of, oh, if you go to a counselor, you got problems, right? No,
real
like,
problems.
Like,
yeah.
no, it doesn't matter if you feel the best in your life. You should use that as a resource to just kind of pop the hood, on your inner self, and just see kind of where those connections are, because out of that will come the rest of your life. So I wish that was something maybe that was going on. The big one was don't rush into, people told me this and I still didn't follow it. Right. Cause there's people listening right now that you're hearing this stuff and you're like, yeah, that sounds good, but I'm not going to do it, or it's whatever. Like,
yeah,
our parents, right. We have had great parents, and I'm sure they said some things and you're like, yeah, that's cool, but I'm going to go to do my own thing. Right. One of those was, man, like just rushing into relationships. I wish, like, if I just would have not and waited till I could actually move forward in a relationship, take a next step. So I would have saved myself a lot of emotional baggage, if I'd have just been, you know what? No, it's not the season of life. If I can't take the next step forward in this, then why start it? Because the only way a relationship can be healthy is if it keeps moving forward. And if you can't go the next step, if you can't take the next step, then why start? Why put yourself in limbo or pause for so many periods of time? I don't know. That's something
that's good. That's good.
That's something that I would wish I learned or heard more of.
Yeah, no, that's powerful.
Yeah. And then also just enjoying the season that you're in. I was so, I don't know if you do like Strengths Finder or Enneagram, but like I'm an Enneagram 3. Strengths Finder, like achiever is number 1. And so for me, so like I'm always thinking about, just the next thing or whatever, and enjoying the season. Just enjoy the season that you're in, because you're only going to live it once. So to be fully there. High school, senior in high school, enjoy it. But part of that enjoyment is thinking about the future, right? And it's thinking about what's next. So live it up. Don't be anxious about it. Those of you in college or starting that first job, having that first job experience, enjoy it, bask in it. Don't be wishing that you were multiple years down the road. Those of you single, listening, enjoy your singleness. This is the only time that you will be single for the rest of your life. So enjoy that moment. Don't be rushing, because again, every season is there for a reason. So
I love that. That's powerful. And, you mentioned a lot of things that even connected with the next level leadership. You said, we have to enjoy the moment that we're in. Well, part of that enjoyment is thinking ahead. It's like that next level leader that has to think farther and everything, but at the same time needs to stay connected. Because
you're living now off the decisions you made 10 years ago. So think about it. Yeah. I'm now 30, right? So I'm living off of the decisions I made in my 20s, and the decisions I'm making now in my 30s, I'm going to be living off of in my 40s. So you have to be in the moment, and at the same time be thinking of, okay, but what I'm doing now is preparing me for what's next.
That's powerful. Well, it has been truly an honor, Pastor Isaac, to have you here. I mean, I felt like, did we just attend Grace Leadership College for free for about like half an hour? Man. This was great. This was perfect. I mean, think about it.
I'm so happy to be a part, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And for those who are interested, definitely look up Grace Leadership College.
Yes, absolutely.
That way you can find out more information. Follow Pastor Elsner also on social media and his church on social media. And guys, I want to thank you for joining the Andrew Ramon Show. We got new episodes coming up. The success stories, we're still we're going to keep going until we run out of success stories. I don't know when, but we're going to keep going. So with that, guys, we will see you in the next episode of The Andrew Ramon Show.